Hey all, today we have part 1 of a 4-part series from Surviving Infidelity. It's called My Wife Cheated on Me During Quarantine. As always, spelling and grammar mistakes courtesy of Reddit. Lol. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps this channel grow. Thank you. Part 1 of 4, My Wife Cheated on Me During Quarantine. I feel that I have to give a bit of context leading up to the cheating. If not for you, for me, as writing is very therapeutic for me and I need more trauma therapy than I've ever needed in my life. Please bear with me, I know this is long. My goal here is not to drag my wife's name in the mud and point all of the fingers at her. I'm going to try to keep this as balanced as I can by owning my mistakes while just giving the facts of her actions instead of who I feel she is as a person. I hate this because as I write this out, I feel like I deserve all of the blame, and in some cases I do, but there are two sides to every story. I have a 14-year-old daughter from a previous marriage that ended in disaster. Long story short, my ex-wife was not a good person and I needed to protect my daughter's safety. I got 100% custody and the mom skipped out by moving from Texas to a European country. Despite the trauma to myself and my daughter, who was 4 years old at the time, I fought to keep some sort of connection between the two. I set up virtual dates either by phone or video when that became more accessible. She hasn't always been present for our daughter, but it wasn't like her two other sons from two previous relationships where there has been zero contact for 12 and 16 years respectively. Needless to say, I was happy to be moving on with my life. It took me about 3 years, but I found what I felt was a tremendous woman who could potentially fill in as a mother to my daughter. This woman soon became my wife 2 years later. I tend to find really good things in people despite their flaws. I have so many flaws, who am I to judge? I want someone who can see the good things about me and not sweat the small stuff. I saw who my wife was to her core and fell in love with her. She is the most hardworking person I've ever met. Things didn't start off very well in the stepmother-daughter arena because at this point my daughter's biological mother was pulling away. She stopped paying child support and stopped showing up for some virtual dates. I was quickly placed in the middle between a 7-year-old little girl who didn't understand why her real mom wasn't around and a woman I was falling in love with. The next 3 years were incredibly intense. And I did not handle the stress of that very well, as my soon wife told me all of the things I did wrong on raising my daughter all by myself. I did the best I could, y'all. Over the next couple of years in this new relationship, my father lost his wife to lung cancer, my stepmother who was like a mother to me, and my father who got diagnosed with emphysema. He lost his house and I had him move in with me. So, at this point, it's me, my new wife, our newborn baby son that we just had, and my daughter from a previous marriage. I handle my stress in two ways. I either overeat because I grew up incredibly poor and never had any food, or I get very loud and angry and yell. This is my biggest struggle and I work on it every single day. There have been days where I was angry all of the time because not only was I placed in the middle between my new wife and daughter, but my wife and father who isn't very easy to live with. The larger I grew in weight gain, the more I grew angry from the overwhelming stress. It got to a point where I yelled at my preteen daughter a lot. I got in her face, I said hurtful things, and I scared her, unintentionally, because I couldn't take the middleman stress my wife placed me in and the attitude I was receiving from my child. I even temporarily kicked my father out of the house for a year, who wound up being homeless and living out of his car. I was afraid every single day that I'd find him dead in his car because he had no place to go and slept in the parking lot to our apartment in the winter. More recently, things have been rocky with my wife for years, and at this point, we now have a 2-year-old son and found out she was pregnant with our youngest son. We started seeing a marriage counselor and have been going to therapy solo as well. Just before Christmas 2019, we were under a great deal of stress. Things were still bad between her and me. We barely had relations for the last 3 years, maybe 30 times in that time period. Despite the stress, I felt the therapy was helping and my anger was well managed but wasn't completely disappeared. Around this time our youngest son contracted the flu and couldn't stop throwing up. We had to hospitalize him, and he wasn't discharged until nearly midnight on Christmas Eve day. To top it off, my wife got the flu and so did I while sleeping on a tiny uncomfortable hospital couch. My mother-in-law was also in town, who I absolutely loathe, and she got sick. Tensions were high and despite everything going on my wife found ways to push every button that I had when we got home. She kept telling me that she couldn't rely on me to take care of our son. Despite me telling her to go home and rest since she was sick as I continued to sleep in the hospital next to our little boy who had just turned 2. I confronted her about her accusations. And she showed no remorse for it and continued to push those buttons. I had a car seat next to my feet where I was standing, and I picked it up and threw it on the opposite side of the house in frustration, away from my wife. I had no idea, but my mother-in-law was laying on the couch by where it landed, and despite how I felt about her, I felt horrible for what I did. I then had to put up with my mother-in-law telling me that I needed to be on medication, I was on medication, and act as if I was the only one at fault here. I wasn't. Privately, I got my wife to admit her actions that led to the argument, but when it came to her mother, she refused to stand up for me as the mother-in-law berated me. And with my mother-in-law, it was a case of the pot calling the kettle black to the extreme. The whole situation was really bad, but this incident was a turning point for my anger. For the last 7 months, my anger has been mostly controlled. I was truly becoming a strong father figure and a loving husband. I was able to fully open up to my therapist about my past that I had repressed and discovered that I had an entire childhood of sexual and physical abuse. I've been sodomized by a family member, I was sexually assaulted by kids down the street from my grandparents' house, and I was abused by a guy at a motel where we lived. I also recalled that I was physically abused by a babysitter for a while, and I was even abused by my mother. This is why I've been so angry, and I was making a huge breakthrough in my life. I was so proud to share my progress and self-discoveries with my wife. My wife and I have been working from home during the quarantine, and as you can imagine, the tensions have been high. For the last couple of months or so, she's been spending a lot of time away from the house. Anywhere from up to 4 to 5 days in a week. She's either going to work out with our daycare provider who she is friends with, or going out with co-workers. I felt that the space between us was a good thing since we've been cooped up for so long. I felt my marriage was getting back on track. We even started to have a little more relations after some heart-to-heart talks about how my weight and her weight had impacted the pleasure for her. It really all made sense because her whole life she's never been a very sexual person, due to her own sexual traumas. I was feeling so good that I was even writing a self-help article to share my discoveries with others so I could help anyone who needed it. Over the last couple of weeks, I started to grow suspicious of my wife's outings. A lot of things didn't add up. She started tucking her phone away when I walked by her, which she never did, and the conversations between us just felt different. A week before our anniversary, she had plans to go eat dinner with a coworker we both knew. She kissed me goodnight and told me that she loved me. It wasn't a quick peck of someone you're obligated to kiss. There was love in there, or so I thought. Her dinner ran late, and it turned into a text message of her telling me she was going to play pool and that she loved me while sharing some kissy emoji which was completely out of character for her, using those emojis. I knew something was wrong. It now turned to 12:30 a.m. when she should have been home around 9 to 10 p.m. and I still hadn't heard from her. I had put both our sons to bed, and I sat up waiting for her, extremely concerned because she did not return any of my texts. I was able to log into her Google account and ping her device to see if she was in a location that would raise concerns, like being in an accident or broken down. She was in a town 40 miles away from our house, far from where she said she was supposed to be. I got in my car and drove over there to see if I could find her car. I arrived at 1 a.m. and was able to locate her car parked in front of a house I did not recognize. It was around this time that my daughter texted me asking where I was. I don't know what it was about the conversation with her, but I felt she knew more than what she was saying. I kept telling her I was looking for her mother because I was worried, and it wasn't like her to be gone so long. My daughter kept trying to convince me that she was all right and she's probably just hanging out at her friend's house. The more we talked, the more I grew suspicious that my daughter was holding back. Because of this, I pretended to be more panicked than I really was at that moment. I told her I was going to call the cops because I was afraid that maybe she was kidnapped or got into an accident or something, even though I was standing behind her vehicle. I paced behind my wife's car for roughly an hour and it was now 2 a.m. She still hadn't come out. Her car used to have an issue where if you opened the car door, the car alarm would go off. I opened the door and I remembered that we had gotten that fixed. No alarm went off. My hope was she would come out and I wouldn't have to knock on a stranger's door to see if my wife was there. I desperately didn't want to go to anyone's house. The light in the car came on and I could see her youth baseball bat she had for protection was sitting upright. At this point, I was still unsure if she was cheating on me. I was pretty sure she was, but there was a part of me that was holding out hope. I grabbed the bat and paced back and forth for another hour while my daughter was unusually concerned about why I was out looking for her. It felt like she was protecting her and kept telling me that I was overreacting. The more she told me I was overreacting, the more I acted panicked. She eventually told me her mother was out with a guy and gave me his address. The address that I was at. Guys, my wife told our daughter in advance she was spending time with a guy she met on a dating app and they both kept it from me. My heart instantly sank, and I walked up to the door. My daughter tried to convince me that they were just friends. I told her that she doesn't get dressed up the way she did to go drinking with a guy that she just wants to be friends with. While I was pacing, I could see a half-naked man walking back and forth. I decided to bring the bat with me for my protection. I had no idea what I was about to walk into, and I was concerned for my safety. That's when this young man, probably late 20s, answered the door. I told him my wife was in the house and I needed to get her. He intentionally played stupid and acted confused. He immediately saw the bat and was concerned for his safety. I know the optics are bad. I explained to him that I was concerned and unsure of what was going on and that it wasn't for me to be aggressive with him. It was for protection. He believed me. It was at this point he said that maybe she's in his roommate's room. He told me that I didn't need the bat because he was very scrawny, but I refused to let go of it. He led me in the house and pointed to his roommate's bedroom. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. My heart sank even more. I was lost, confused, and scared. I turned around and looked at the roommate and he knew what was going through my head, which is funny because I had no idea what was going on through my head. He said, "Don't do it, man," and it triggered something in me. I had so much instant adrenaline as I kicked the door open and saw my wife lying naked in bed with a naked man. For a split second, it didn't feel like reality. My anger came back, but not like it had in the past. It was an "I'm afraid" yelling. I was yelling, asking why the hell she was there. At this point, she had the audacity to yell at me and ask why I was there. The guy was a complete douchebag. He got up holding his teeny weenie and was giving a lot of smirks and making snide comments. It took everything inside of me not to react violently. I'm not a physically violent person, so it wasn't in me to do so, but I gripped that bat tightly as he walked out of the room. My wife continued to yell at me and even demanded that I leave the house so she could get dressed. I couldn't fathom how this conversation was playing out, but I reluctantly walked outside so I could get my wife out of the house. She's stubborn and I knew she wouldn't leave if I didn't step outside. I stood outside that front door waiting and I saw the guy walk into his garage because there's a house window from the patio to the garage. Then I watched my wife walk in there fully clothed. She hugged him and apologized to him for my actions. She had no idea I could see. My blood started to boil as I yelled at her for what she was doing. We didn't have much of a conversation outside and I struggled to keep from vomiting all over the street outside of his house. I felt deathly ill and my wife didn't even care about my feelings. This is the mother of my 3 children. This is the woman that I promised to spend the rest of my life with. This is the woman that I am deeply in love with, and she was treating me with a coldness that I've never experienced from her before. I didn't see the woman who kissed me goodbye and told me she loved me. I saw hate. I saw the disgust. I'm really good at reading people and I'm especially good at reading my wife and daughter, but I did not see any of this. We drove home in separate cars and my daughter stopped responding to me. She ran away. Because of my past anger issues, she has developed a serious fear of me. It's 3 a.m. and she's at a local park hiding until my wife got home. It was the longest 40-minute drive of my life. I'm devastated, crying, confused, and angry. I get home and I'm desperately trying to find my child because I'm worried about her safety. This is when my wife gets home, and my daughter comes out of the shadows. I tried to talk to my wife in a respectful and calm manner, but she wasn't having it. She was tired as this was a work night and she had to be online for work in 2 hours. It was at this point that my daughter told me that she wanted to move in with my wife and that she wanted nothing to do with me anymore. She told me she'd only visit me out of obligation. This was the second dagger in my heart. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. I didn't eat anything for 7 days and lost 17 pounds. The very smell of food made me nauseous. I got my wife to talk a little bit and she told me she planned to legally adopt my daughter with the intention of being a family and then divorce me and take her from me. I later found out that my daughter was texting my wife and telling her she was trying to record my phone conversation with her to use against me in a court of law. The conversation was a phone conversation I had with her while I was finding my wife in bed with another man, and I had to wait outside his house while she got dressed. I was being conspired against. I felt betrayed. The last week and a half have been incredibly challenging. I drove to my hometown to be with my 3 kids and family through this tough time, and I learned a lot from my daughter. I learned that my wife had been bad-mouthing me to her for a while now. They have been making fun of my body issues and sharing text conversations she was having with the guy she was sleeping with. They both kept referring to me as insane and crazy, like I was at fault here. I can't imagine how someone can drag a child into a very adult situation. As intelligent and mature as my daughter is, she's still a little girl. She doesn't understand any of this, and she's only getting one side of everything. My wife and daughter have really bonded because my wife has been spending our money on things like Starbucks so they could spend time together. It wasn't about the money, but it was about the quality time spent together. Whenever I wanted to spend money, I was always told we were broke. My wife obviously controlled the finances. I've felt broke for 7 years now, but somehow, she was always able to buy things on Amazon. My daughter absolutely has the right to be upset with me for the things I've put her through, but I feel it has been escalated by a shared experience with my wife while she bad-mouthed me. If my daughter was at a 4 out of 10 on an unhappy scale with me, the conversations with my wife bumped her up to a 10. My daughter even told me she encouraged my wife to seek male companionship. My anger has been bad throughout her life, and I'll pay for that for the rest of my life, but it hasn't been anything that has warranted the treatment I've been receiving. If you ask anyone who knows me, they will tell you how much I love my children and how I would do anything for them. Now my wife and daughter are wanting to put her in our divorce decree. A non-biological daughter in our divorce decree. They want to make it legal. I'm so lost, confused, angry, lonely, hurt, and flabbergasted. I don't know how this story will be received here. I'm sure there will be some who rail on me about my anger and my actions, and those who are just as shocked as I am. I had hoped I would feel better after I typed this out. But I don't. I'm an absolute mess, and the person I need the most to help me get through this hates me, and I have no friends in this state that I can turn to. This hurts. Edit, we're amicably getting a divorce. I've had to swallow my pride and shove down my pain for the betterment of my children. If I make her hurt like I'm hurting, it only hurts my children, and that's not acceptable. Don't miss parts 2, 3, and 4. I will add the links to them in the description as soon as I post them. Thank you so very much for listening. Please check out my other videos and like and subscribe.